Hi everyone, my name's Brydie. I'm the social media director for MedMentors and I am also a final year medical student.
Hi, I'm Emma and I'm the MedMentors founder and president and also a final year medical student.
So today we're making a video about what not to do in your medical interview, as well as a few tips of what we think you should do. Today's topic is covering teamwork and conflict resolution. So without further ado, let's get stuck in.
You're on the MedMentors committee, and you and a group of volunteers have put your hands up to organise a GAMSAT preparation event. This event is next week, and one of the team members has stopped coming to meetings or replying to emails and has not completed their tasks. How would you approach this situation?
So in this STEM for this question, I'm on the committee of a MedMentors, and there's an event that's happening for GAMSAT preparation, and someone hasn't been pulling their weight. So there's a few different people that are involved in this. So it's me, it's the other people on the committee, and then it's the person who's not pulling their weight. So obviously that's not okay. So I would approach them by basically having an empathetic conversation with them and trying to figure out why they're not pulling their weight, so that hopefully we can sort of come to an agreement and they can do what they need to do. And so, like, as I mentioned, like there's other people on the team. So obviously they're involved as well. And I might need to like speak to them as well to sort of get their perspective, and then sort of have an empathetic discussion, maybe with the individuals, and then maybe come back and have a discussion with the team. And yeah, that would be what I would do.
All right, your first follow-up question. You find out that the team member's daughter is sick. How would this change your approach?
So obviously it wouldn't change my approach too much, because as I mentioned, like I would be really empathetic in the first instance. So I would, take them aside and have a conversation with them and try to figure out, what's going on. So, and now I have that answer. So, I'd be empathetic regardless. Like it wouldn't really change, the way that I respond, whether or not there's like a background reason. I mean, it might change, how we react once we already know, but it wouldn't change things in how I change my approach in the first instance.
You hear a rumour another individual on the committee has put organising this event on their resume, even though they are not involved. What are the issues here, and what would be your approach?
So as I mentioned in the stem of this question, there's me as part of a committee organising an event. There's also the other people that are in that committee who are sort of part of it. And then there's also this other individual that we spoke about before who hasn't been pulling their weight. And now we have a new individual who is actually not involved. And basically what that person's done is put it on their resume, even though they're not involved in the event. So that's what's going on in this scenario. Now, basically, if they're not involved in the event, they shouldn't be putting it on their resume. I think that's probably the first issue here. And obviously there's issues with that sort of thing when you're not sort of involved in an event or like an assignment or whatever, and you put it on your resume. That sort of means that like your resume lacks integrity, and then like the people that are looking at your resume, that means that they're employing you basically on like a fake basis. So that's obviously really bad. And I think like the trouble is that sort of impacts everyone, because if people haven't lied on their resume, then those people are disadvantaged. So that's like obviously not fair. So yeah, and then now that I know that that's not fair, like I feel like there's a bit of a responsibility on me now to address it with that person. Like I found out, but the trouble is like I found out through a rumor. So the trouble is like I don't even know if it's true or not true. Like it could just be gossip, or it could be it could be true. I don't know. So I'd probably have to go back to the person that told me and like kind of figure out how they found it out, because like I don't want to go and confront that person and then it turns out it's just like a lie, a rumor, it's not even true. So I'd have to go back to the person that I originally, heard that from and like find out how true it is. And then, maybe I could then speak to the person who's put it on their resume, because obviously like I need to tell them that like. So that's our example of how not to do your interview. Now, you may have spotted a few things yourself, or perhaps you need us to go through them, and that's fine. So have a little think about things that you think we can change, and then have a listen to what we have to say and see if you agree with them. So the first thing that I did that I think you should avoid trying to do in your own interview is I reiterated the stem of the question. And in so doing, I actually wasted a lot of my own time. The examiner has the question in front of them and knows the question like the back of their hand. Chances are they've heard many other people answer this question in the same day, so they know what they're looking for. They don't need you to reiterate the stem for them, and it doesn't show them anything about how you understand the question or how you're responding to the question. All it does is take up your own time, and you don't want to do that when you've only got 5 minutes. The next thing that I did in the follow-up question was I mentioned empathy and started talking about how I would approach this individual with empathy. But what I didn't do was elaborate on how I would do something with empathy. Suffice to say, it's not enough to just say you would express empathy. You actually have to explain the methods you would use to do it and how you would not get the person offside by potentially confronting them with this area of conflict. We don't know for sure why this individual is behaving the way they are, but we want to approach them in a non-confrontational way. And there are specific strategies for doing this. It shows that you appreciate that you shouldn't be confronting when you speak to an individual like this, but it doesn't show that you've actually got those skills ready to go and that you have a specific strategy for doing it. So if you want to bring your answer to the next level, you need to be prepared to elaborate on how you would do things. In the last response, I did the same thing that I did in the first response and reiterated the stem of the question, which ended up wasting a lot of time. I think the other thing you might have noticed is that the answer was really unstructured. I had no direction of where I was going, and I ended up just talking myself into a heap. That's a dangerous trap to fall into, and it's very easy to do when you're nervous. So you do need to have specific strategies for structure to fall back on. In summary, I don't think I elaborated on any of my answers very well, and I think they lacked depth. The examiner knew that I had a rough idea of what to do, but I don't think I made it very clear to them that I had the skills to actually do what I was saying, or that I had any experience with how to manage a conflict situation. We'll hand over to Emma and see what she thought about things.
So as the examiner, again, if you do some practice with your friends and you get to be the examiner for them, if they start the question by reiterating the question every time, even you are going to start getting a little bit bored. It starts it off a little bit chunky and it might make the examiner actually zone out. And you definitely don't want to do that at the start of your interview, especially when you have such a short time frame to get through this. So utilize as much of your time as possible by answering the question and not reiterating it one more time for them. Unless you can take that advice with a grain of salt if it gives you more comfort and keeps you calm and grounded, and then the rest of your presentation goes more smoothly because that's how you've started. If that works for you, then that's great. But if you don't need it, just get rid of it. A lot of people get feedback that they haven't elaborated enough on their answers, and this was a great example that Brydie displayed. Talking about the empathy is excellent, but we don't just want to drop buzzwords. We really want to show the empathy. Our actions speak much louder than words. So actually stepping the examiner through what you would actually do. And this can be as simple for you as thinking, if it was a real life situation, what would you actually do? What's the conversation you would have? How would you actually approach this person? And just playing that out with the examiner so that we can be walked through exactly what your thought process is. You have to remember that the medical school is trying to picture you at their medical school and how you would cope in a situation like this that might pop up during your medical school time. And if you're just telling them, I will be empathetic, they can't really picture you at medical school and what you'll do. So you really have to lay it out for them so that they can picture you doing those things and they know that you're going to be okay. It felt like Brydie did have a lot of things that she wanted to say, and it was clear that she had a lot of thoughts and that she quite enjoyed the question. But without that structure, it was quite hard to follow where her points were leading. And at the end of the interview, I wasn't quite sure what her point even was. So just be careful of that. The more practice you get, the better. Your structure will come to you with time. It's one of those things that you don't want to just copy it out of a book or find an online resource that tells you this is how you have to structure it, because that won't be genuine to you. But you will find your own structure in your own time with the most amount of practice that you can possibly get.
So there are a few considerations in this situation that I need to make. Firstly, there's how this whole situation makes me feel as someone on the team. Secondly, there's something obviously happening with this individual that's caused them to disengage. And thirdly, I would be interested to know how it's impacting the other team members as well. In any team situation, if one team member drops the ball, ultimately that can cause all of the teamwork to break down. My personal belief is that all conflict in teamwork results as a result of miscommunication. And I think there's a potential that something along those lines might have happened here. And the best way to resolve a miscommunication is with communication. So the first thing that I would want to do is open communication channels with this individual that seems to be dropping the ball. And the way I would do this would be with a really empathetic approach. So first things first, I'd want to take them aside. In COVID times, that might be a little bit challenging, but I'd want to get them aside, perhaps just for a coffee, or if that's not possible, on a Zoom meeting, and have a really candid discussion with them about what's been happening. So I'd really want to be listening to them. I would ask them in the most non-confrontational way I possibly could what was happening, and then I would really want to hear them out and listen to their answer. Once I'd done that, I'd want to figure out a little bit more about where we could go from there and what sort of negotiations and changes we could make to facilitate it for them. I'm sure if this person was engaged previously and is now suddenly disengaged, that something's been happening. So I would really want to be a shoulder to cry on, an ear to listen to them, and figure out exactly what's been happening. Once I've done that, with their permission, I'd probably go back to the other team members and explain that there have been perhaps some issues with the other team member, and try and get to the bottom of a way that we could negotiate a strategy that works for everyone.
Great. So you have a follow-up question here. You find out that the team member's daughter is sick. How does this change your approach?
So ultimately, because I approached it in the first instance in a way that was empathetic and non-confrontational, I would hope that the team member would feel really comfortable to tell me themselves that there was some issues going on at home, i.e. that their daughter was sick. In finding out this information, it only opens the door for me to be even more empathetic for them, towards them, and to hear them out and potentially offer support where I can. I think in this instance as well, I could even offer to go to the president of the committee for them, or the leader of the team, and just let that person know that there have been a few sticking points, that this particular individual has other challenges, and that perhaps they might not be able to do so much for this event, but perhaps be willing to do things down the track. And because they have given us a bit of a time, we still have a week, I'd be speaking to the other team members and seeing if we can restructure things so that the burden is taken off the individual who has the sick daughter. Finally, again, I'd want to offer my ears to that person and listen to them and sort of provide them with any emotional support that they need. Having a sick daughter is obviously a really challenging situation for them. And my first priority would be making sure that they're okay and that they've got the support they need, whether that's, in the capacity as a team member or just as a friend.
Great. And your last follow-up question. You hear a rumour another individual on the committee has put organising this event on their resume, even though they were not involved. What are the issues here, and what is your approach?
So I think the major issue here is that if an individual puts something on their resume that they didn't actually do, it ultimately undermines the integrity of their resume. And if they are using that to apply to a job or apply to a university course, or really whatever they're using it for, effectively they've told an untruth on that. And so the people that are reading that resume will potentially believe that they have skill sets and competencies that they don't actually have. And that has some far-reaching impacts, both for the individual who now is thought to have competencies that they don't have, and also for the people that are employing them or taking them on as part of a university course or a committee. So that's one of the major issues. The other major issue is it does undermine the work of the individuals who are on the team that have worked hard for the event. They've put themselves out there, given up some time for other activities to really work hard. And it would be upsetting for them to learn that their hard work was undermined in that way. So I think, unfortunately, with this, I would have to speak to the individual involved, but I would probably want to elucidate a little bit more clearly what the rumor, where it came from, whether or not it was actually true, whether that be by speaking to the individual who told me, or whether I just go directly to the individual who's on the committee and let them know that I did hear a rumor. Ultimately, again, it would be a conversation that would be sensitive. So I would want to take them aside and speak to them privately, and really hear out their side of the story. They've probably put it on their resume, potentially because they don't have much else to put on there. And I would hopefully be able to come up with some strategies for them to be able to put things on, or maybe find a way for them to be engaged in the event without compromising the integrity of a resume.
Excellent, thank you. So as you can see with take two, Brydie really elaborated on her points in this one, and we actually got a very big picture of what she would really do in a situation like this. And we have a little bit more insight of what might happen while she's a medical student should something like this occur.
The other thing I aim to do, and I hope you think I did it well, was to structure my final response in particular by starting off by saying that I had 2 strategies, listing what they were, and then expanding on each of them by elaborating on what exactly I would do.
That's probably a really good structure to have, especially for the last question. If you don't know how much time you have left, at least you've sort of left the examiner with an understanding of where you are going to go with that question as well.
For my first response, I used what we call a stakeholder approach, which is a form of structure that runs through the people who are involved in a scenario. And then I could go on to explain how that scenario impacted them. I think for this style of question, what it offered me was an ability to structure my answer in a meaningful way and then further elaborate. Thank you for joining us for our what not to do and what to do medical interview question today. So today's topic was teamwork and conflict resolution, and these questions come up all the time. You'll get 2 sort of styles of question. It'll be either one where you have to speak to a time where you resolve conflict, or there'll be an example like in this question and you have to explain how you would resolve conflict. Don't conflate the 2. Make sure you have an example ready to go, but also be prepared to speak to an example like what we had today. We will have more of these videos coming if you like them, so please thumbs up, subscribe, and let us know what you think. Feel free to comment, give us some feedback, give us some criticism, let us know what you liked and what you didn't like. And if you have any suggestions about the type of medical question you'd like us to answer, feel free to throw that in the comments as well. Thanks for joining us. See ya. Gomez bed.
You hear a rumour, another individual...
Oh, sorry, trying to get on my bed.
And what would be your... Damn it.
So now, as I mentioned in the STEM, I feel really stupid. We mentioned we're preparing for the Did you hear Gomez?
What was that?
He was just lying down and he just let out a sigh.
Aww.
Mate, your life is not that hard. For example, no, I don't have an example.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Damn, what was I gonna say? No, it's gone. Tune in next week. It's like play school.
Can I just leave these on the whole time? I really like them.